Na-stress drill on. I mean, we were just talking about the performativity and optics and all. Remember the other day, simulacra.
Yes.
Some are wondering if this is a form of performative regime change. Because last time I checked, the interior minister, the vice president now constitutionally, the interim president Rodriguez, the defense minister, everyone is there. The remnants of the Chavista regime is there. So was this just regime decapitation and kind of a leverage to pressure the rest of the regime to toe the line? I think it was quite telling that President Trump made it clear that he's not endorsing the opposition leader Machado, who dedicated her Nobel Peace Prize to Trump and everything like that, as the right person to run the country at this point in time. So it's kind of a recognition that the remnants of the Chavista regime, at least in his estimation, are strong enough to still remain in power, and therefore it's just a matter of U.S. cutting a deal with them. But again, there are lots of stories about behind-the-scenes negotiations. Maduro apparently, supposedly offered to negotiate. He was offered a gilded exile in Turkey. He did not take it. He danced too much, pissed off Trump, and Trump moved ahead with this operation. There's another version that perhaps parts of the Chavista regime who were not happy with Maduro's reliance on Cuban intelligence forces, among others, kind of cut the deal with the U.S. So there's so much lack of clarity. The only thing that was
Okay.
quite clear is that, at least for Donald Trump, oil does matter, apparently. Everyone was saying, no, this is not about oil, this is about X, Y, and Z. But, I mean, just watch the press conference. Donald Trump made it clear this is indeed about the oil of Venezuela, which is the largest reserve in the world, larger than Saudi Arabia and Iran combined by some measures.
But Richard, performative or not, this is an assault on the rule of law, on international law, and the sovereignty of nations.
Absolutely. In the same way that performative, I don't know, drug war in Digong had actual effect on the lives of people, including the loss of lives of people. And let's not forget, there were civilians who lost life during these operations. There were, I think, even civilian port facilities allegedly affected. So, in fairness to government of at least Spain, Pedro Sanchez, to a certain degree, many governments in Latin America, even the DFA in the Philippines, they mentioned that indeed this is not. It's the legal justification is not very clear. What international law was exactly broken here? There were attempts by U.S. officials to say this had to do with the alleged involvement of Maduro in drug cartel activities, etc. But if it's the whole regime, then why only Maduro was taken out? So there's lots of questions about this. And as I said, yes, it also could set a precedence, and this is a worry, set a precedence that, well, if your argument is this is about Don Roe doctrine or Donald Trump's Monroe doctrine of, this is our backyard and Russia, China, and the rest should keep away, and how dare you to come in? I mean, because the Chinese envoy was there as this operation took effect, then what will stop some in Beijing saying that, well, if Putin did his thing in Ukraine and the U.S. is doing this in Venezuela, why not, maybe not today or tomorrow, but now 5 to 10 years down the road, why not someone in Manila or Taipei, if they pissed us off, will come up with some legal justification and abduct them just because we can?
Well, Richard, exactly that, right? Anything that the U.S. does, the whole world catches a cold. That's an old saying. So I'm going to go straight at it. How could this impact us here in the Philippines in terms of course, the tensions ongoing in the West Philippine Sea? You already mentioned China.
Well, I mean, first of all, wag natin kalimutan yung kasaysayan. No? The first head of state who was abducted, guess what? Was a Filipino by Americans. I'm talking about General Aguinaldo, right? Who beat the Spanish, right? He was winning the war on his own. Next thing you know, his allies turned on him and cut a deal with the Spanish. And next thing you know, he was captured by them. So we have our own history of having a head of state of ours, President Aguinaldo, being captured by the Americans, quote unquote, captured by the Americans. So there's that history we have to keep in mind. The other thing is that, if you come from a small size, medium sized country, I don't know why you should be so fond of seeing superpowers creating so-called spheres of influence. This is the 19th century we're talking about, 18th century and beyond. There's a reason why we created international law. The reason why you have international law is that so that we don't have a rule of the jungle, we have a rules-based international order. Of course, international law, especially public international law, has been imperfect. We have seen so many conflicts and wars, but the past 7 decades were exceptionally peaceful and prosperous if you look at human history in the past 10,000 years. And a big part of that was because of the effort of internationalists to create public international law, to create the ICC, ICJ, and all of these imperfect yet still consequential institutions. So consequential that Digong is facing justice that he would not have had faced in the Philippines, for instance. So speaking of the West Philippine Sea, if the position of the Philippines is we don't want a rule of the jungle. We filed that arbitration case against China, and even if China does not accept it, international law applies. And then you have this situation like this here. Obviously, that puts us in a bind because we're a U.S. ally. And then to make it more complicated, I'm sure there are military experts in the Philippines looking at this and saying, oh my, it looks like the Americans are still the military superpower, considering how seamlessly they conducted these operations. Even Chinese military experts are watching this very carefully because they were also flabbergasted by the seamlessness of this operation. So there are many mixed signals being sent to the Philippines, but as I said, naturally, as a mid-sized country, as a global South country, we should be invested in a rules-based order, not a rule of jungle.
Well, Richard, several lawmakers already condemned the U.S.'s actions. And with that said, what do you think our government should do? Should they even do anything to mitigate the possible impacts of what happened in Venezuela? The whole world already anticipating impacts on oil prices and even inflation.
Well, on the oil question, I think if you look at the proper analysis, Bloomberg, among others, have released very detailed analysis on this. It's going to take a long time. We're not talking about Middle Eastern oil. This is a very heavy oil that needs a lot of refining. You're talking about a battered infrastructure in Venezuela that may take years, if not decades. More than $120 billion perhaps have to be poured into Venezuela for them to go from 1 million barrels of oil exports to 2 or 3 million. So we're not going to see an overnight oversupply or glut in the oil market. But yes, of course, over the long run, should Trump move ahead with Greenland, should consolidate America's new Monroe Doctrine and really focus on energy security and supply chain security, you're going to create a new international order, and that's going to inevitably impact the Philippines. But as far as the Philippines is concerned, as I said, I'm not expecting massive changes in the oil market in the short run. I think for the Philippines, more the concern here is that how do we balance our alliance with, if not reliance on the United States on the one hand, and at the same time, our commitment to a rules-based international order. And that's where we have to work with other mid-sized countries, middle powers, who are also of similar mind. That yes, none of us like, Maduro, none of us want authoritarian leaders who run their country to the ground. That cannot be denied. But having said that, we cannot also just turn a blind eye when things happen that are in clear contravention of international law, or at least the legal basis of that per international law is not so clear.
So ASEAN should take a stand, perhaps?
That's going to be tough, right? We're the chairman of the ASEAN this year, so we can set the tone, we can set the terms of discussion. Whether we like it or not, I'm sure many in ASEAN are more, critical of this than not. I think, if you look at the non-aligned positioning of most of ASEAN countries, if you look at the statements that came out of Indonesia and some of the key countries in ASEAN so far, not to mention Vietnam and Malaysia, I think it's inevitable for ASEAN. It's important for ASEAN to reiterate that what we need is a rules-based international order. And I think the Philippines, so far the statement from the DFA really tried to strike that balance. Some would say imperfectly, but at least there's that kind of effort. At least hindi natin ginawa ng ibang bansa na, we're just monitoring the situation. I think that was the most quoted statement I've said. Like, we are monitoring the situation is one of the most seen statements over the past 48 hours. Because I think many countries were worried about also alienating the United States, while at the same time clearly worried about the greater implication for the international system.
All right, Richard Heydarian, geopolitical analyst, thank you for your time.